Welcome to Safety Matters. I'm your host, Walt Seigan, and we're going to be talking about transferable skills, but I also want to remind you, if I may, that our philosophy on Safety Matters is lifestyle safety, whether you're at work, at home, at play, or transportation. And of course, we've mentioned on other shows our magazine, Family, Safety, and Health, that's available through the National Safety Council. So with us we have Ron Smolarski of Beacon Rehab Services. Ron, welcome to the show.
Good morning.
We're talking about transferable skills, and maybe you can define that for our viewers, if you will.
Well, transferable skills is used in different ways depending on what form you are. If a person's applying for Social Security, or if they're on say they're injured at work on a workers' comp, or an auto accident or no fault, or they're on long-term disability insurance, transferable skills is thought of and used differently. In workers' comp, no fault, and long-term disability insurance, the claims adjusters are looking at the rehab professionals to provide them with an idea as to what other occupations a person can do if they cannot do the previous type of work in a safe way. They are looking for alternative occupations that they can still work competitively and work at a sustained rate. The Social Security Administration, they look at transferable skills, but they look at it differently. All they're looking at is how long it takes for them to learn a particular occupation.
Ron?
Yeah.
If I can interrupt you at this point, how does the viewer recognize that this is going on? I guess to the viewer, they might call it, because he's injured, a job change or favoring work, or that they're trying to look into some options or alternatives for him. Is that the way it would come to his attention in a work scene?
Well, most of it is behind the scenes, and they're really not that aware unless the rehabilitation counselor talks to them. Probably the first time they'll become aware of it is their doctor will say, look, you've got to change jobs.
Okay.
Their physical therapists or occupational therapists will say, you know, I just do not see you going back to work. And it's hard to accept, because if you've been working in a job for 15 or 20 years and you develop carpal tunnel or a rotator cuff injury or a L4, L5, which is a back injury, these are the most common type of injuries. It's hard for a worker to accept that, hey, I got to completely get out of this work. Or he might have been working, or she might have been working and making a great deal of money, and now start at the bottom of a ladder in another occupation.
I see. So there really is some psychological effect probably too on the worker, that he feels, gosh, you know, this isn't that much different. Why can't I do my regular job? But I think the medical profession is trying to tell them that if you keep up this line of work that you're doing now, you're going to really aggravate what your condition is.
Well, yeah, but there's, in some ways, for instance, let's just say a person has a hand injury. I can look at what's called their transferable skills and look at these worker traits that would affect it. Like, for instance, fine finger dexterity, manual dexterity, motor coordination. I might be able to see if a modification could be done to the work site, as long as, let's just say the person can't go back to the previous work at that plant that he's working at, but maybe another job he can. By looking at his transferable skills, I might be able to see, well, look, if we can modify a particular job, he can still work at a competitive rate, still work with his previous employer, and still save maybe some of that seniority that he had been building up, plus all the benefits that he receives.
Well, there's a real benefit there then for the medical people to know what the other jobs in the plant are and to become familiar with them to a certain extent.
Yeah, and that's kind of hard for them to do that. And what we do is we videotape a job, and we do what's called a job analysis. And if we find that the person has transferable skills to work in a particular occupation, we then will videotape that job. We will do a job analysis, present it to the physician and maybe the occupational therapist to review, to see if they accept it. And if they do, then we can place the individual into that particular occupation.
So that's really this transferable concept that you mentioned earlier about skills.
Well, the transferable skills is a way of finding alternative work. What else can a fellow do if he's injured and can't do what he did before? Can the job be modified, or can he be doing other types of work that's similar in nature? And when I say similar, it's where you're looking at maybe, I call them worker verbs, you know, hammering, scissoring, packaging, you know, those are activities that he's familiar with. Or maybe he's familiar with the rubber industry or the glass industry.
Sure.
And so it's a comfort zone.
Sure.
If you're familiar with those things, you can move in from one occupation to another, and it doesn't take that much more to learn the new job.
I know too that back injuries are pretty common in the workplace. Upwards of 20% of worker-related injuries are back injury related, and I know that many businesses require now back belts and so on. But for back injuries, is this something also that you get scientific about in terms of these transferable skills, maybe some human factor or ergonomic considerations?
Well, yeah, it affects one. Actually, the trait that it affects is what's called, the federal government calls it medium work, heavy work, sedentary work, and light work. And what it pertains to is how much a person can lift at a full range of motion. A full range of motion means 6 inches off the floor to 72 inches off the floor. And the pace, can they lift at a competitive rate? Usually when people have a back injury, it also affects their upper extremities, their arms, because when they're at full extension, their arms are stretching out and they're trying to assemble something, they feel a significant pain in their low back area, so they can't work as effectively using their arms. So as far as the worker traits that are affected, those are usually ones that are affected. When I'm testing an individual, those are the traits that I see that are affected, and in doing so, it'll affect their transferable skills.
Sometimes the classic that I remember hearing from workers is that, how does the doctor know that I should be okay? I have the pain, not the doctor. And sometimes those opinions are questioned and challenged by the worker, where he's saying, I still have pain and nobody is listening to me. Is this something too that the transferable skill may help to alleviate or strengthen, to recognize that the person does still feel this pain?
Well, transferable skills, your question is a little bit different than what transferable skills are, but
I don't mean to throw you a curve like that, but...
Yeah, well, I mean, sure, there's many times a doctor cannot objectively determine why a person's feeling pain, and he can say, especially when you get what's called the IME doctor, independent medical doctor, who can say, hey, there's nothing wrong with you, Jack, you know, you should be getting back to work, and and here's this disabled guy say, hey, I'm feeling pain, I don't care what you're saying.
Sure.
Well, that guy could very well be feeling a significant amount of pain, and there's no type of test that's bringing out where and how much that pain is. But I might be able, by doing a work capacity evaluation, I find out, well, you know, he can do these other types of jobs that are within his transferable skills, and he can still work at a competitive rate, and his pain level, it's not that great. It's still there, because many times a doctor, he reaches a certain limit, there's nothing he can do. And we live in a society where we expect everything to go away. We live in a, you know, take an aspirin and bump it out at the bump shop, and that's not going to happen. The doctor will say, you got to live with it. And that's kind of hard to accept. So if you can look at your transferable skills, you can look at other types of work that, you know, maybe you can still do and work at a competitive rate. As an example, maybe an individual can't be a bricklayer anymore because he's got a back problem, but the guy, maybe the man was good with math, could figure out all sorts of multiplication in his head, and he can be a good estimator. And if he's got good verbal skills, then he has maybe some possible transferable skills as an estimator, and he could be the individual that might be the salesperson or just do the estimations for jobs.
I guess that's interesting because people possibly have to start to think about being more adaptable to some change. And I guess, like you say, if you've been in a job or an occupation for 5, 10, 15 years, you kind of get stayed in that occupation and you feel that that's it for you until you retire. And I guess that thought process needs to be modified a little bit when an injury happens, and there needs to be that assessment of skills to transfer to another nearby area like the bricklayer and transferring to being an estimator.
Right, you're absolutely right. Well, what happens is you'll have maybe a family, and maybe the grandfather was an electrician, and the father was an electrician, and his son was an electrician, and maybe he even started getting coffee and Cokes and donuts for the other guys when he was 12 years old. So he's been, by the time he's 25 years old, he's got quite a few years of experience in that particular work. So when he gets injured, it's hard to say, hey, you can't do that kind of work anymore. And I had a similar situation like that where I had to really fight with the client to consider being a bookkeeper for the family business in this situation. And the guy really didn't want to do it, but I realized that the father who was running the business, that was his downfall. He was a poor estimator, and he was poor in accounts receivable, poor in accounts payable, but his son was very good at that. And I had problems with the claims adjuster at the time because the claims adjuster wanted to just cut the guy off, and I had to keep him away from the client at this time and convince the client, hey, why don't you take a class? And eventually the son did learn the classes. He did get through the required classes to become a bookkeeper, and he was able to run the business, the family business. But there was a lot of fighting and just a lot of encouragement on my part to keep the adjuster from cutting that fellow off and keeping that fellow in school and going after that long-term goal as a bookkeeper.
That might have been an experience even for the adjuster then, to get a different level of awareness as to the benefits of these transferable skill concepts.
Yeah, I think many times the adjusters are more cut and dry type people. They're just looking at the financial end of it, and they think of transferable skills as being a very simple thing. You know, if a guy can't be a carpenter, why can't he be a plumber or something?
Sure.
And well, that doesn't mean the guy can still work at a competitive rate. And what you're looking at is, you're looking to see where a person can work at a competitive rate and a sustained rate, and you have to look at those transferable skills, and that takes looking at 24 measurable traits. And it's hard for a lot of claims people to recognize that because, see, they're just looking at the dollar figures all the time, and sometimes they're a penny wise and a pound foolish when looking at some of these claims issues.
To ensure that you talk from the same orchestration, if you will, or the same yardstick, is there anything that's out there now to educate even our viewers or people in general or claims adjusters about these concepts like transferable skills?
Well, I mean, it's within its field of rehabilitation counseling. I think the only thing they can do is ask certain questions that make them a better purchaser of services and also a better client. They won't be taken by a professional or any of the other claims people, attorneys, judges, whatever. If they know what's going on, they can at least speak up for themselves if they have just a little bit of a knowledge about what transferable skills are all about. They can help themselves in terms of Social Security issues, workers' comp issues, or a no-fault type.
Okay. Is there anything in federal, you mentioned earlier some federal definitions or distinctions, is there anything something in the federal arena that would give some common denominator understanding to these claims people, or is it something that they need to self-educate about? But maybe before I ask you for that answer, I'm just going to have to announce that we're going to take a short break now. So please stay with us, and we'll be back with more on transferable skills.
Hello, I'm Michigan Secretary of State Candace Miller. Being stranded on the highway is a motorist's worst reality, but by following a few simple safety tips, you can stay safe. In case of an emergency, pull off the road. Signal for help using flashers or a sign in the rear window. Stay with your car. Call for help on a cellular phone. Accept help from only uniformed officers. To help you stay safe, Michigan Secretary of State branch offices have free safety information for you. I urge you to get this information and stay put and stay safe.
Yo, what's up? What's your name?
Johnny?
Hey, Johnny. Real cool yard you got here.
I know, but I didn't used to have one.
No? Where'd you used to live?
Around.
Well, how come you got to move here?
Some nice people helped my mom find a job, and we got to rent this house.
Well, you seem to like it here.
We like to hoop a lot. Maybe we could become stars. We need to practice more.
We're back again with Ron Smolarski about transferable skills. And Ron, before we took our break, I mentioned about the common yardstick here that might be available to the claims person, to our viewers, about what some of these understood definitions ought to be, and the duty that a claims person owes his client to. Is there some way that they can come up to speed, if you will, on the same level of understanding as you are?
Well, they probably won't be able to do that, but they can. There's a few tricks that they should be aware of, and that is, one is that they can ask the professional that's doing the transferable skills analysis if they're using a computer, and what's the reliability of that system.
Ah, that's a good idea.
You know, you're just asking horsepower. Come on, tell me what's the reliability, and not only that, ask them what their inter-rater reliability is, because what that tells him, if it's at the, like say, the 90 percentile, that or 0.90 or and above, that means that the assessment tool that individual is using is very accurate. Anyone in the United States or in Canada could use this instrument and come up with the same factors as that professional. Those two are probably the most important. Now again, they have to know what reliability means. And reliability means that just that when you test an individual, you're going to get the same score if you test and retest over. So it's a way of knowing that that particular instrument is effective. And you have to use a computer nowadays. You can't, there's so many jobs, there's well over 12,000 jobs in the American economy. There's in each state there's about approximately 2,000 different types of jobs. But you have to have a computer to go through all those different traits. And the traits are what make transferable skills. And just to give you an example what traits are. Traits are like what kind of math abilities do you have, what type of reading abilities do you have, reasoning abilities, fine finger dexterity, they call form perception, color, your ability to determine color. Those are all traits, and there's 24 of them. And we measure those, and then from those, we're able then to determine what jobs a person can do.
So these traits then, these 24 traits actually comprise the considerations that anybody should use, even claims people, for transferable skills.
Correct.
Okay, so our viewers then can always ask the claims person the same question about the reliability of the system. Right?
Right.
And whether these 24 skills are the skills that are being evaluated of this person, then I guess the question I would want to ask is, what options do I have? If I'm disabled or partially disabled as a result of a work-related injury or even a non-work-related injury, what else can I do, and how much is the person who's handling my case knowledgeable, or should I ask, is he certified certified in transferable skills? Is that a valid question?
Well, I don't think you can really get certified in doing transferable skills, but the inner rater reliability indicates how effective that rater is effective in doing transferable skills.
Can you say that fast in reverse? I'm just kidding. Inner rater reliability.
Right.
Is that just IRR? Is that it?
IRR, right.
Okay, inner rater
reliability.
Okay.
Now, there's a legal case called the Dalbert decision, and in that Dalbert decision, they talk about some of the important things that an expert must have. And an expert must have reliability. The instruments that they use has to be used within their professional organization. It has to be peer reviewed. And so if those things are happening, if you really want to scrutinize this individuals, that's where you would go. You look to see if the instruments the person's using is peer reviewed. I don't think people are going to spend the time researching highly technical books, but I mean that's how I would do it.
Sure. But if anybody also has a question, let's say they remember a part of this program and then something happens to them and they have questions, they could always call you and ask you what's going on with their situation, and then you could remind them about these 24 traits and about the inner rater reliability. Did I say that correctly?
Right.
Okay. And some other steps that they could use to ask the claims person about the course of their treatment as to the reliability of the treatment.
Correct. They can always request that they have another provider. They don't have to stay with that. They actually, under workers' comp, they have a right to it. And no fault, they have a right, but they're going to have a fight. And Social Security usually, they can make requests. You know, I'm not Social Security, I'm sorry, long-term disability. With Social Security, like I said before, they do their transferable skills analysis differently. But if they have an attorney representing them, they can win their case more effectively because the Social Security system only uses a couple worker traits to make a decision if a person should collect Social Security or not. So if they get their own evaluation and they bring in an attorney that does a transferable skills analysis, they can have a better case because that case is more evaluated because the courts really can't afford to pay for the type of assessment that's really needed for Social Security cases. A lot of it's very subjectively driven by the judge and the expert. They look at a lot of material, they listen to the person talk, and then they come up with a conclusion.
Do you think that the presence of an attorney, and I guess what I think you're saying is that the attorney can really truly benefit a person with a Social Security problem in terms of going before a judge, probably because the judge and the attorney might be talking the same language. Is that what you're suggesting?
Well, yeah, but what they need is more than that, because many times these Social Security hearings, the attorney just reviews the file just prior to the hearing, and that's it. What they need are some very specific assessments to draw out what the deficits are with this individual and why this person can or cannot work.
I see. Okay, that probably again is something that through an attorney can be conveyed in a better fashion. I guess what I'm getting at again is that sometimes recently in the media it seems to be some level of bashing of attorneys, that there are too many attorneys in the world and we don't need attorneys. But in this case there's a real plus to the benefit of an attorney on behalf of a person that would be able to have the intelligence to get this evaluation done and communicate it properly to a judge.
Well, that's their arena. It's their ball game. They're familiar with it. But even with attorneys, they have to have the right tools, and this is a very important tool.
That's my point, yes.
And the tool, they have to use it effectively also. But the attorney, he speaks the lingo, and he knows how to deal with the judge. But by presenting this additional tool, the transferable skills analysis, it helps the professional tell the attorney, say, look, you need to test this individual in these areas to show where the deficits are. You need to take medical terms and put them into vocational terms.
Right.
And that's what the transferable skills analysis tells me as a professional. How, look at, this fellow's poor in math, and the government's saying this guy could work as a cashier. Well, let's just do a wide range achievement test and be able to prove that this fellow can't do math. Or the government may have said, well, yeah, he can be a cashier at a one of these gas stations, not realizing that just because he was a carpenter and his buddy was doing all the measuring. There's a rough carpenter, maybe that's happened where the guy just doesn't know how to use a rule, and he's got his buddy doing all the measuring, and so the government felt, well, if he was a carpenter, he had to know something about numbers, and he can work as a cashier. Well,
okay, so they make these hasty generalizations based on their knowledge of a trade without really understanding the individual's capability.
Well, a lot of it's paper decisions. I hate to say hasty because I don't think the judges would want to hear that, but like I said, they are very limited in the type of assessments they can do. They hire like what they call a vocational expert who just sits there. He reviews maybe the file, and the judge will throw some hypotheticals. They listen to the individual talking about his disability, how it affects his everyday work and why he can't work.
I see.
And then he makes a decision, and he'll say, well, this guy can do this type of work, and there's so many of these types of jobs in the American economy or in the county of Macomb, and the judge makes his decision based on that. But if the client's attorney can bring some additional new information, assessment, based on transferable skills, now you've got something.
Interesting. How does this affect the Americans with Disability Act in Michigan?
Well, both the American Disability Act and the Michigan Handicappers Act, the transferable skills is very important because, for instance, let's just say you're working at General Motors or some company and the employer refuses to take you back after being injured. Well, if the individual looks at their transferable skills, they might see other types of work that they can still work at a competitive rate and a sustained rate within that same shop. And so those laws are out there to help the injured worker so they can get back to work.
I know this definition and inherent in the definition is the words reasonable accommodation. And is that where these transferable skills may also come into play to define better?
Right, because when I'm looking at accommodating an individual, trying so that he's able to work again, I'm looking at what worker traits are being affected, so that if the person's being affected by lifting, if they have a shoulder injury, let's just say, then I'm going to, and I see that, okay, this job requires this level of effectiveness using their lifting abilities, and they only have this level. Well, is there a way I can accommodate it? Maybe it might be a special lift. Mm-hmm. It might be just putting the work surface at a different level so that or for instance, maybe the person's reaching down into a tub, pulling out parts, maybe putting those parts at a tilted angle and putting it on the work surface so that there's a spring-loaded skid to make it at a level that's workable.
Very good. Well, Ron Smolarski, I hope that our viewers will call you if they have any questions, and I'm sure that they probably will, or even in the future. So we want to thank you again for being a part of Safety Matters, and we hope that you folks will join us again and let us know what your questions and thoughts for some other topics for other shows are. Thanks again, and we'll see you. Bye-bye.
Extraordinary people doing the most ordinary things. And while they have to put more effort into it than most of us, and a larger amount of will, you won't find them asking for sympathy or for praise, only for the chance to get up and do it all again tomorrow.